Oh. So, well, President Juncker, it is an absolute honour to welcome you virtually to the Trinity Law Society. Firstly, thank you so much for taking the time out of your extremely busy schedule to accept our award and be with us today.
I'm here and I'm in your hands.
So I suppose before we begin, the actual presentation or virtual presentation of the award, we would just like to perhaps say a few moments just about the award and why you have been nominated for today.
Okay, you must have good reasons.
Yeah, excellent reasons. So the Law Society was founded in 1933, and for 88 years, the Society has strived to provide its members with opportunities to socialise, to engage in discourse, and to experience new phenomena. And the Praeses Elit Award is an integral part of that endeavour. It is given to those who've left an indelible impact in their chosen fields and who advance discourse and societal thought in the process. The award was founded by Mary Robinson, former auditor of the Trinity Law Society, and of course, the first female president of Ireland. This year in particular, the Law Society wishes to place an emphasis on empowering students, not only in their careers, but also in their everyday lives. And it is for this reason that President Jean-Claude Juncker has been nominated for the Praeses Elit Award. President Juncker is a long-serving European political leader, the former Prime Minister of Luxembourg and Commission President. He holds a distinct status for us all in our nation who watched as he ably steered the Commission ship through Brexit negotiations. There can be no doubt that his views would be valued deeply by Trinity students, as he is an outstanding example to those who aspire within the same field and those who aspire to fulfill their potential in any field. This award represents our deep appreciation of all his work and all that he has contributed to shape the Europe we live in today. For this reason and much more, we would like to thank President Juncker and present him with the Praeses Elit Award. So President Juncker, have you any just general words of acceptance before we go on to some questions or anything you'd like to say?
I'm very honored and that I'm given this famous award of the Trinity College. I don't know if I deserve it, but to some extent I think that I deserve it. Because I always wanted to put aside the divisions between European nations. I have a long-standing friendship when it comes to Ireland. I discovered Ireland when I became a member of the Council of Ministers back in December '82. And I noted that since the day Ireland joined the European Union, it was behaving like a founding member of the European Union. It was not a founding member, but it's behaving like a founding member. Founding members do not always behave like founding members. So I'm very happy to receive this prestigious award. And I wanted to say hello to my Irish friends, because I have many, many friends in Ireland. They discovered it maybe during the Brexit negotiations, because as a president of the then Commission, I was always swimming in the same channel than Ireland was swimming in. I always tried to explain to others that Ireland is not something neutral for the other Europeans, but a member which has many merits on its side. So I'm really honored to receive this prestigious award. Unfortunately, we are only together virtually. I would have liked to be live and in colors amongst you, but the day I received the notice that I would be awarded, we were in the middle of a pandemic, so I was hesitating. Yes or no, the period of time. Now it would have been possible, but I have taken other appointments, including today. So I'm happy to be there, even if only virtually. I would have liked to be there physically in order to kiss and to embrace all my Irish friends, including you.
Well, President Juncker, we would have enjoyed that obviously a great deal, and it is a great pity that you can't be here in person, but it's our honor anyway, and nonetheless to have you here virtually and to learn from your great wisdom. So I suppose from that leads us to our first question. Before we kind of discuss your exceptional career as a long-serving European political leader, and perhaps we could begin with what was life growing up in Luxembourg, and how did this shape your view of Europe to one that has obviously much influenced our view of Europe today.
You must know that my father used to be a steelworker, and so I was living 600 meters behind the steel, one of the main implantations of steel industries in Luxembourg. And so I was growing up in that atmosphere together with my father, with the neighbors. All of them were workers, steel workers, and I learned many things when listening to them, because they were meeting as a steel team in our kitchen, and I was listening as a young boy, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, to what they were discussing. So I entered the steel atmosphere in a very intimate way. This was paving the way to what did become, in the course of the years, the social ambition I had when it came to Luxembourg steel industry, to workers in general. I was a member of a trade union before being a member of my political party, and I discovered very early that the social dimension of the European Union was not sufficiently developed. As a Minister of Labour, I was Minister of Labour during 70 years. I did everything possible to promote the social dimension of the European Union. Without my father, without the Luxembourg steel industry, this would not have been possible.
Absolutely. And President Juncker, you've often spoken quite publicly how your father was forcibly conscripted to work in the German Wehrmacht. Sorry, excuse my pronunciation. Do you think this also influenced your views of having, the importance of an integrated Europe?
Forget about the pronunciation, because we should forget about the German Wehrmacht. Yes, indeed, my father was enrolled by force, as we are saying, in this country into the German army. The young Luxembourgers born between 20 and 27, all of them were recruited by force by the German Wehrmacht, because Luxembourg was under German occupation since the 10th of May 1914. My father, as all those who were in war, did not speak, was not very outspoken when it came to their experiences during wartime, because they wanted to forget this, and they didn't want to tell their young boys, their young girls, what this was about, because it was brutal, it was cruel, it was impossible, it was nothing. Because the generation of my father was a lost generation, because they didn't have a youth. They had to go to war for reasons they didn't understand, and for reasons they had nothing to do with Luxembourgish place in Europe. But it made a big impression on me that he was not telling me what was happening in his life, in his young life during the Second World War, but he transmitted a message to me, and the message was never again. He transformed, like millions of other Europeans, this eternal after-war prayer, never war again, into a political program which is producing its benefits till today. But without the war experience of my father, the way he described it to me, without entering into details, because he didn't want to enter details, nothing in my life would have been possible with the steel career of my father and the war experience of my father.
Absolutely. So it's then fair to say that those through the steel and then obviously the war experience of your father certainly did have a deep impact on
Yes.
the Europe.
They had, yes.
Okay. And then following, university, you studied law. Is that correct?
Yeah.
But you never practiced as a lawyer. Instead, you went straight into your political career. How did this come about?
In fact, I did deliver to the court two plaidoyers, and then I decided to step into to go into politics, because I have met so many people having been active in politics, older than me, the generation of my father. I was admiring them because they were doing the right lessons for the Second World War. And so I went into politics in the Christian Democratic Party. And the legacy of this political family in Luxembourg and elsewhere on the European continent, also in Ireland, was that we had as a duty, my generation, to put aside the divisions of nations. I'm not saying that we decided to put aside the differences between nations, mainly the cultural difference, which do exist, did and do and will exist between nations, but this European dilemma to make a choice between peace, freedom, and war, oppression, dictatorship, was one of the main lines I decided to make mine during my political life.
And the Europe, when you entered your political career, how would you describe the kind of current state of the EU?
No, it's not really the old world, but it remembers us that nothing definitely has been made. Peace is not forever, and peace is always fragile, and peace is always in danger. We experience this.
Absolutely.
While we are speaking, I always mentioned in my public speeches here in Luxembourg, elsewhere in Europe, in all the European countries, that there is this eternal dilemma, this eternal European dilemma between war and peace. And now, as far as our immediate neighborhood is concerned, we are thrown back in the age of the old demons, which are developing their bad influence. And so, yes, we are not really coming back to the European Union as it was after the end of the Second World War, but we are coming back to a kind of Cold War. I grew up during the Cold War period, having in mind that the rockets of the Warsaw Pact were directed to Luxembourg and to other Western European countries. We are not yet there. I hope that we will never come back to this. But the fact that someone has decided in his country and with his army to invade neighboring countries, to put an end to this post-war peace order we have experienced in Europe, is something which I was never believing. Even weeks ago, I was saying in all my public speeches, there will be no war between Russia and UK, but nevertheless, it happened. And so I'm really disappointed by what Mr. Putin, the president of the Russian Federation, is doing. I had a good relationship, more or less friendly and friendship relationship with Putin. I met him more than 30 times in the last years. I'm said. It should never have happened, but it happened.
Absolutely. And, there's now, of course, the next question is, will Putin stop at Ukraine? And if so, when will the EU step in?
The EU did not really step in the war, as NATO did not, because we know the stepping in by NATO would have as an immediate result a war between Russia and the NATO member states, which in fact would be a kind of European world war. So we refrain from doing that. But I didn't believe that he would invade Ukraine. I don't believe that he is ready to open a real war between the Russian Federation and NATO. NATO is the strongest, the biggest, the largest military power in the world. I don't think that rationally he could be prepared to a war with NATO and with the European Union as a whole. So my prayers are, and my hope is that he will never do that. Am I sure? Yes. Am I definitely sure? No.
You can never be, though, I suppose, definitely sure. And perhaps.
But we were sure during at least 30 years from now. We were sure that this would never happen, but it happened.
Because President Putin in 2014, when he made, when he invaded Crimea, I suppose the consensus then was that he would never try and invade all of Ukraine. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. And that was even correct a month from now, because nobody in fact believed that he would be ready to invade a neighboring brotherhood country, as he unfortunately did. When he invaded Crimea, we took sanctions, weak sanctions to some extent, but we thought that it would be that. That was a major mistake, to consider that he would stop there. He didn't stop there.
So I suppose, what is the appropriate EU response? I know at the moment where leaders are looking at, of course, is it, I think, around 60% of EU's gas is, of course, comes from Russia. So apart from, looking at alternative gas supplies, what is the appropriate EU response?
I think that there are two dimensions of immediate response. Number one, we have to put these economic sanctions on Russia. Russia is suffering from the consequences of these sanctions. The European Union did decide. And number two is that we have to increase our military defense power. I'm not very much in favor of this, but for the very short term, this has to be done in order to show that we are ready to defend our values, our principles, and our freedom and liberty. And Putin knows that Article 5 is not an empty article, Article 5 of the NATO treaty. If one country of NATO is attacked, all the countries are attacked, and they have to respond collectively and in common. But I'm not too much in favor of having this military renaissance of our defense means becoming a midterm and long-term objective. I don't think that you can make peace sure by arms. I don't think that this is the right way. And I do think it's out of reality to say this during this period. I do think that in Europe we need a common security architecture, and by the Europeans and by Russia. This seems to be out of the world for the time being, but I can't imagine that these relations between Russia the Europeans and between NATO will stay as they are for the time being. This cannot be the way leading to a better future. So we have to stay in permanent dialogue with the Russians and with President Putin, knowing that we have to impose economic sanctions, as I said, as point number one, and that we have to rearm ourselves as point number two. I'm not happy about that because I never believed that weapons and arms of mass destruction could be the way the European Union could choose as paving the way for the continental future. But for the time being, it's like it is, and we are what we are. We are ready to take the challenge.
Absolutely. And President Juncker, would you say if there is any resolution foreseeable for the Ukraine crisis, what would be the best possible,
But I will not enter speculations as far as a kind of final agreement between Russia, Ukraine, and the West, NATO, and the European Union could be. I strongly believe that dialogue has some merits, that we should not stop the dialogue with Russia, although it's difficult, although it's to some parts dangerous, because Putin started to lie. And if you have a counterpart who doesn't refrain from lying, and if you yourself, you are honest, you are starting on a different field and you are moving to different fields. But I think that dialogue is needed, having in mind that we have to strengthen our muscles.
Absolutely. I think, as you highlighted there, the importance of communication between these world leaders and countries and powers. Certainly, President Juncker, during especially your presidency of the Commission, you've experienced many EU crises, from Brexit, and of course now. What would you say has left the biggest scar on the European Union and the stability of the institution as a whole?
The biggest challenge, and in parallel the biggest risk, is that we have to maintain the cohesion between free nations, because Russia was always trying, even during my mandate, not even, but also during my mandate, to put some elements of division between member states of the European Union. That's not a specific Russian behavior. The Chinese are doing exactly the same. And the US are not always refraining from this temptation to put divisions between member states, because these big powers, China, Russia, to a minor extent the US, is that they never considered the European Union as a whole. They didn't like the idea of having this organized grouping between European nations. They wanted to deal bilaterally with these member states of the European Union. Unfortunately.
And why is that, do you think, President Juncker?
Because the Russian Federation is considering that it is a power by itself, and it doesn't recognize on the European continent a different power from theirs. They didn't like the idea to have these European nations acting in solidarity. And we were never acting against Russia. We were never, and we are not in war with Russia. Mm-hmm. But we have to defend European values, European principles, and they don't like it because they don't like the idea of democracy. I had so many meetings with President Putin, and I always noted that, he liked to speak to me as a person, but he never accepted, in fact, the other dimension I had, the President of the European Commission. So we have to maintain this cohesion between European nations. And I think that he is rather surprised to see this cohesion of the European nations when it comes to this conflict between the Russian Federation and UK. He had messages from different member states of the European Union that these sanctions, not the one we have decided now, but those which have been decided after Crimea and even before that, they told him, some of them, not the majority, minority, to them, don't take this too seriously, because these European nations are very much in love with their own interest, and this own interest, national interest, don't coincide at each and every moment with the European interest. So he must be very surprised to see that there are no divergences, sometimes some nuances, but great coherence in the way European nations are reacting to what he did in Ukraine.
Absolutely. So if you anything that
You are saying always absolutely. I like that.
Yeah.
I like that very much. I'm not used to that. So absolutely, go on. Absolutely.
You're used to a lot more debate. So the Ukraine crisis highlights the need for EU stability and, as you said, EU coherence. And I suppose from that if you focus even more on the recent which you negotiated as you mentioned before, the Brexit, the UK in the case, I suppose, of the EU have to take a coherent response. Would you suspect them to follow a similar stance to the EU?
I am still very sad about the Brexit, because I don't think that this is a move in the direction of future history. It's exactly the opposite. It's a step back by comparison to what generation of my fathers remember, and by comparison to what we did in the European Union. I was negotiating with Theresa May. I was negotiating with Boris Johnson, and we made a deal. I was negotiating with David Cameron. Before the referendum campaign in Britain, we put on paper an agreement, which costed a lot to me and to the European Union, mainly as far as the freedom of movement of workers was concerned. This agreement we negotiated with the Cameron government didn't play any kind of role during the British referendum campaign. It was hiding it away. We had an agreement, and Cameron did not defend that agreement. He never argued on the basis of the agreement we had reached between Britain and the European Union. But the fact is that it has happened. I was not surprised, I have to say.
And why was that, President Juncker?
I said it to my surroundings, so I'm not inventing something new after disaster, which have happened. But if you are telling your people during 30, 40 years that the place of Britain is not really inside this European Union, that the European Union is good for internal market reasons, is good for economic reasons, but that they are not sharing the dream of other continents to have this European Union becoming closer and closer, then, and if you are criticizing with bad and wrong arguments, the Commission and the Council of Ministers and the European Council giving the impression that, yes, okay, we are playing that game, what we don't really agree on the substance of what the others are deciding. You should not be surprised that the day your people is asked to give his opinion on the European integration, they are saying no. I bid a bet with my then British Commissioner, Lord Hill, that Cameron and the British government would lose the referendum. He thought that they would win the referendum. I said, you will receive €1 from me if you are losing. I will receive the £1 from you. If you are winning, you will receive the euro from me. If you are losing, I will receive a pound. I still have this pound in my pocket because I was not surprised after this negative propaganda and these lies which were told to the British people during the referendum campaign. I was not surprised that the answer was no. And we had one first victim, that was Ireland. So I decided, together with the Commission and with Barnier, who was the chief negotiator with the British governments, I have to say, to stick to the Irish position. Ireland should not become, that was my main concern during that difficult period, the victim and the only prominent victim of Brexit. So we were always in favor of keeping alive the Good Friday Agreement in all its elements, not only in letters, but also as far as the spirit of the Good Friday Agreement was concerned. I fell in love once again with Ireland during the Brexit period.
And the Northern Ireland.
You have to say absolutely.
Absolutely. Thank you, President Juncker. And would you say that the Northern Ireland Agreement was one of the most difficult aspects of the negotiation process?
It was one of the most difficult. We spent hours and hours and nights and days on the Northern Ireland protocol, but we signed it and the British signed it. And so it has to be respected in all its elements. So we cannot step away from this basic agreement we have reached with Britain when it comes to the Northern Irish reality.
Absolutely.
You are recovering.
Because President Juncker, you've certainly negotiated many difficult treaties throughout your time in the EU, including the Maastricht Treaty. Would you say that the Brexit process was one of the most difficult experiences that you went through while
No, it's something to see a member of the European Union to step away from membership. That's not a harmless event, and it created a lot of damage both in Britain and in the European Union. It was one of the most difficult, yes. But if someone wants to leave, you can't stop travelers. If they want to leave, and if you want to respect democracy and the expression of democracy, which was the case during the vote of the British people, you have to take it fully into consideration. I never wanted, although there were some temptations from remaining members of the European Union to stop them. You couldn't stop them because they had a clear mandate. It was not as clear as deputy. It was nevertheless a clear mandate from the British sovereign, the British people. You can't stop them. And then you have to find ways and means how to arrange things in the best way possible, both for the British, because I was not negotiating in the spirit of revenge. No. They had voted. People were asked in their opinion, but you have to deal with what appears to be, after the 23rd of June 2016, the new reality. We had to respect the British vote, but we had to make sure that our interests were safeguarded, and they were. And the British did sign the agreement.
Absolutely. And as you were discussing earlier on, you have to uphold the EU values. One of those is, of course, democracy. So respecting the Brexit vote is, of course, one of the maybe consequences of that. But I suppose, how do you would you suppose, best safeguard against the Euroscepticism that Brexit has perhaps, reinforced, and create the sense of belonging to the Union amongst member states?
I was always of the opinion that one shouldn't run after populists and that one shouldn't copy populists. If you populists like Farage and others are entering the scene, you have to oppose them. Not too much tenderly, but bringing the conflict back to basic principles. And one of the recent dramas of the European integration is that parts of the classic political family started to run after the populists. Don't copy them. Don't repeat the same things. Don't even give the impression that you are sharing their views. No, this has this did come back to the starting point, because after Brexit, the cohesion between member states was augmented, and populists lose, as far as the continent, Ireland are concerned, their nocive influence. After the Russian invasion in Ukraine, the cohesion is integral, is entire. So if we are threatened by risks coming from outside, I have to consider British as being a country outside the European Union. These risks are occurring, the cohesion is augmented. I have seen, although I don't believe in opinion polls because this is to some extent momentaneous nonsense, I have nevertheless noted that the day after the British decided to leave, the cohesion was increasing, which evidently shows that an overall majority of European citizens do believe that sticking together is the way European nations have to adopt when it comes about paving the way to future. The Euroscepticism did not increase after Brexit; it was diminishing after Brexit. The Euroscepticism is not increasing after the Russian invasion. It did not decrease after the Russian invasion. It did augment. So when things are becoming serious, Europeans are sticking together. It's not a guarantee for the mid-term and the long-term future, but for the time being, the picture is that Europeans are standing together. It was also the case, and it has been observed, in the first weeks of the pandemic, because then, in January, February 2020, each and every country of the European Union and Britain was trying to cook its own pandemic soup in its corner. Then we noted that this could not be the way, that we had to stick together. That's what has been done after February, March 2020, and we are taking this line till now.
Absolutely. So paradoxically, through these challenges such as Brexit, such as the Russian invasion of Ukraine, highlights the need for European countries, especially like Ireland, that are smaller in size, to integrate and to stick together, I suppose. So, Mr. Juncker, my next question for you would be: what is your long-term vision of the EU, or how do you predict Europe will look in years to come, given this changing landscape?
My long-term vision, as I explained to you during our exchange of views, is that we have to do everything to put aside the division between European nations. You have to know that the European continent is the smallest continent in the world. That from an economic point of view, we are losing influence. Our part in the global GDP is diminishing. And from a demographic point of view, we are running to a kind of non-existence, because at the beginning of the 20th century, Europeans represented 20% of the global population. We are now at 5-6%, and by the end of this century, we will be 3-4%. So as we are small, as we are demographically weak, and as we are losing economic influence, we have to stick together. And that's also a message to be directed to those who are in charge of defense policy in Europe. We are losing strength because we are divided. We have 173 weapon categories in Europe. We have more helicopters than we have member states of the European Union. Our defense budget, which is higher, putting together all the national defense contributions, is higher than the one of Russia. It's half of the American defense spending, but our efficiency is less than half of the American efficiency. So we have to synergize the defense efforts on the level of the European Union. So I'm pleading for a strategic autonomy, which is mainly meaning the military and defense sector. All this has to be done, and it will be done.
Absolutely. And I think Emmanuel Macron also advocates as well, Charles McGill, for this European strategic autonomy. And I think, Mr. Juncker, you know, in the media, you're often associated with the dream of a United States of Europe. Would you say this is an accurate representation?
No, I was always surprised by this narrowing between this generous idea of having the United States of Europe and myself. I stopped to speak about the United States of Europe at the age of 1920. And since I went into politics and into European politics by the end of '82 as a young deputy labor minister, I noted that the Europeans don't want to have this kind of United States of Europe. We have so many, fortunately, so many cultural differences, so many development divergences in between the European nations. We are not the United States of America. We will never be the United States of America. The fact that I was presented as the one who would fiercely defend the United States of Europe is a British invention. Is a British invention, because not only did they say that I'm drunk, that I'm unable to do the job, they always pretended that I'm old-fashioned European, as if I would be one of those who had to go to the Second World War. I was never a scholar of that school, never, because we do want to be Luxembourgs. The Germans do want to be Germans, and the Bavarians and Saxons, and the French want to be French, and Corses and Britons, Breton, I don't know how this is said in English, and Alsatians. The Finnish, they do want to keep the differences between the north and the south of Finland. The Italy of the north is not to be compared with the Italy of the south. All this has to be kept in life. And all we have to do, that's the duty of my generation, is to take away the poison of nationalism. And nationalism directed against neighbors and against those who are living far from us. So we are Europeans, and so we will never be the United States of Europe. Never, absolutely.
Absolutely, I think as you have emphasized, is through accepting our divisions that we can like truly cooperate and have integrate. And on a final note, Mr. Juncker, you're clearly an incredibly pragmatist politician who has achieved a lot. So my final question for you is, what sort of legacy do you wish to leave behind you? Your European legacy.
Sometimes I'm very often asked that question. Sometimes I do think that my legacy, so to say, is the sum of all this, that we have to put an end to divisions between European nations, that we should not run after the populism, but that we should plead in favor of European integration, not in a way that we would finish by constituting the United States of Europe. I think that we have to rediscover something which was very present after the end of the Second World War. We have to organize the renaissance of the inner European love. We don't know enough about the other Europeans. What do the French know about the Finnish? And what do the Finnish know about the Italians of the South? And what do the Spaniards know? Not even about Portugal, because their ignore is larger than one would think, given their proximity. We should try to understand better why the others are like they are. They have good reasons for being different from others. And this difference should not be seen as a hurdle to a deeper European integration, but as a phenomenon which is enriching the European integration.
So once again, and I think, a main thing that we do is we fear things that we don't know. So perhaps in creating this, excuse my affectio societas, this affection for the union, is by educating ourselves and,
Yeah, but affectio societatis is a good description of what should be increasingly a major performance of the European Union. As I said, the ignorance about the habits, the traditions, the uses, the way others are living is underdeveloped in Europe. It should be by far more developed. So Affectio Societatis is a good program, was a good program for Europe, and will remain a good program for the European Union.
Well, thank you very much, President Juncker. Your words certainly inspired, informed, and you've administered great advice and insight into the EU. And I think if we'd like now to we have just one or two questions from our panelists, if you wouldn't mind looking. And the first one is from Colin McCarthy, who asked, due to rising tensions between Russia and the EU, do you think there is a chance that the EU will federalize in the future? Or at the very least, will there be a push for an EU-run military?
Independently from this question of a total European integration, I'm not in favor of total European integration, given the differences existing between the European nations. I think that we have to spend more efforts, that means more money, to the European defense. I'm not a fan of increasing the defense means of the European Union, but for the time being, we don't have any kind of other choice. I was always advocating a European army back in 2015-16. I was killed by Farage and by others for having this idea in mind. This is not a short-term realization, but it has to be done in the midterm.
Thank you very much, President Juncker. Another question is, do you foresee any difficulty with new countries acceding to the EU at different speeds? For instance, it appears that Northern Ireland's way back into the EU could be expedited if Irish unification is voted for, whereas the situation with an independent Scotland is less clear. Will any concessions to these, in a way, former members be made from the normal accession process?
I'm a specialist of Irish concerns, but I'm not a specialist of the Irish reunification. This is a mining field, and so I don't want to work through this mining field. Northern Ireland has to find its place. It's up to the northern part of the island to make its own decision. And second part of your question was? I tried to avoid the mining field, so
I think it was, do you foresee any difficulty with new countries acceding?
No, yeah, the accession of new countries is different. When I started my mandate as president of the Commission, I warned the European Parliament before speeding up the enlargement process of the Western Balkan countries. I was heavily criticized in the Western Balkans for having said that, but it appeared during the last 5, 6, 7 years that these Western Balkan countries are not ready for membership because they have too many tragic differences amongst themselves. We cannot import into the European Union these unsolved problems they have amongst themselves. And as far as the membership of Ukraine is concerned, I'm saying, as I'm saying for the Western Balkans, that all these countries have a crystal clear European perspective. But membership is different from having a European perspective. I was negotiating during 5 years with the succeeding presidents of Ukraine, the membership of their country in the European Union, and they are not ready. The Commission has to assess their readiness. How can you assess the readiness of a nation in war? You don't know what kind of economic recovery will be put into place. There is a remaining problem in Ukraine, as elsewhere, but mainly in Ukraine, that's corruption. I was discussing heavily, fiercely with my Ukrainian counterparts to fight against corruption. I didn't succeed to realize much progress in that not so complicated field, because it's corruption or no corruption, it's nothing in between. So I think when it comes to the accession of the candidate countries, Moldova, Western Balkans, Georgia making big progress on its road to the European Union, Ukraine, we have to add time to time.
Thank you, President Juncker. I think you've already answered this, but the final question was, what do you think about Ukraine's possible membership in the EU, which I think you've just answered.
Yes, I did so.
Yeah. Well, on that note, President Juncker, I'd like to thank you most sincerely on behalf of the Law Society for taking the time in your day to accept our award. And once again, it is an absolute honour to have you and to have met you. And I wish you to have a great day.
And thank you for the award. It's deserved. Yes, it's deserved.
Absolutely.
Okay. Long live Ireland. My best greetings to the Irish.
Thank you very much, President Juncker. And once again,
okay.
it's an absolute honour.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.